The rain drummed against the stained glass windows of Riverside Chapel, creating a melody that should have felt romantic but instead echoed the growing unease in Natalie Chen's chest. She stood in the small preparation room, her fingers smoothing down the ivory silk of her wedding dress for the 100th time. The vintage lace sleeves had belonged to her late grandmother, carefully preserved and now given new life for this moment. Sophie burst through the door, her face flushed and eyes wide with concern. She closed the door quickly behind her, pressing her back against it as if trying to hold back bad news that was determined to enter. Natalie felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. She could read it in every line of her best friend's body language. Sophie crossed the room and took both of Natalie's hands in hers. Her voice came out steady but strained. "Derek is not here yet. The ceremony was supposed to start 15 minutes ago. Father Williams is stalling, but people are starting to notice." The words seemed to come from very far away. Natalie heard them, understood them on some level, but her mind refused to process their full meaning. She had spoken to Derek just last night. He had kissed her goodnight at her apartment door, his smile warm and reassuring. He had whispered that he could not wait to make her his wife. Maybe he is stuck in traffic. Natalie heard herself say, grasping for any reasonable explanation. "The rain is pretty bad today." Sophie's expression told her everything she needed to know. This was not about traffic. "I called him 6 times. Sophie said quietly. "His phone goes straight to voicemail. I called his apartment, his office, even his gym. No one has seen him since yesterday evening." The room tilted slightly. Natalie reached for the nearby chair, lowering herself into it carefully. The wedding bouquet of cream roses and lavender sprigs rested on the vanity table, their sweet scent now feeling suffocating. "There has to be an explanation," Natalie whispered, though even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice like frost spreading across glass. A soft knock interrupted them. Father Williams peeked inside, his kind face creased with worry. "My dear, perhaps we should speak to the guests. Let them know we are experiencing a brief delay." Natalie stood, drawing on reserves of strength she did not know she possessed. She smoothed her dress again, squared her shoulders, and nodded. "Let me go out there. I need to see for myself." Sophie tried to protest, but Natalie was already moving toward the door. She walked down the corridor that led to the main chapel, her heels clicking against the polished wooden floor. With each step, she felt pieces of her carefully constructed future crumbling away. She pushed open the door to the sanctuary, and 200 faces turned toward her. The chapel had been decorated with fairy lights and white hydrangeas, everything she had dreamed of. Her mother sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief. Her father stood beside the pew, his jaw clenched. And the altar stood empty. Derek was nowhere to be seen. The murmurs started immediately, a wave of whispered speculation that made Natalie's skin burn with humiliation. She forced herself to walk down the aisle, each step feeling like moving through deep water. She needed to reach the altar, needed to confirm with her own eyes what her heart already knew. He left her. Halfway down the aisle, the side door near the altar opened. Natalie's heart leaped with desperate hope. But it was not Derek who emerged. Vincent Morrison stepped into the chapel, and the room fell silent. Natalie had met Vincent perhaps 10 times during her 2-year relationship with Derek. He was the successful older brother, the one who had built a tech empire before turning 35. Where Derek was charming and easygoing, Vincent was intense and focused. He rarely attended family gatherings, always claiming business obligations kept him away. Now he stood in the chapel, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain outside. His green eyes scanned the room before settling on Natalie with an intensity that made her breath catch. He walked toward her with purpose, each step measured and deliberate. The guests watched in stunned silence as he closed the distance between them. When he reached Natalie, he spoke in a voice low enough for only her to hear. "Derek called me an hour ago. He is not coming. He said he could not go through with it. The words landed like physical blows. Natalie felt her knees weaken, but Vincent's hand shot out, steadying her elbow with surprising gentleness. He asked me to come here and tell you. Vincent continued, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. He was too much of a coward to face you himself. He is at the airport, flying to Portland for a job interview he apparently scheduled weeks ago. The betrayal cut deeper than Natalie thought possible. Derek had been planning his escape while helping her choose wedding invitations. While tasting cake samples and discussing honeymoon destinations, he had been preparing to run. Vincent's voice dropped even lower, taking on an edge of steel. I will not let you be humiliated like this. Not by my brother. Not in front of everyone who came here to celebrate with you. He took a step back, and then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, Vincent Morrison lowered himself to one knee. The collective gasp from the congregation sounded like a strong wind rushing through the chapel. Natalie Chen. Vincent said clearly, his eyes never leaving hers. Marry me instead. Right now. Let me give you the wedding you deserve. Let me prove that not every Morrison man is a coward who runs from commitment. Natalie stared down at this man she barely knew. This powerful, intimidating stranger who was offering to upend his entire life in a single moment. Her mind screamed that this was insane. That marrying someone out of pride or pity or whatever complex emotion was driving this impossible offer would be a disaster. But standing there, abandoned and humiliated, with 200 pairs of eyes watching her fall apart, something shifted inside Natalie. She looked into Vincent's green eyes and saw something unexpected. Not pity. Not even primarily about saving her from embarrassment. There was something else there, something that looked almost like relief, as if he had been waiting for an excuse to do exactly this. Yes. The word left her lips before she could overthink it. I will marry you. Vincent rose to his feet, and for a brief moment, something unguarded flickered across his face. Relief mixed with determination, and perhaps something deeper that Natalie could not quite name. He turned to face the stunned congregation, his hand moving to rest lightly at the small of her back. Father William stood frozen at the altar, his prayer book clutched against his chest. The elderly priest blinked several times, as if trying to clear a vision that refused to disappear. Vincent addressed him with calm authority. Father Williams, I understand this is unusual. However, Natalie has consented to marry me. The license bears the Morrison name. Unless there is a legal impediment, I see no reason we cannot proceed with the ceremony as planned. The priest looked between Vincent and Natalie, his weathered face etched with concern. My dear child, marriage is a sacred covenant, not a substitute arrangement. Are you certain this is what you want? Natalie felt the weight of every eye in the chapel pressing down on her. She thought about walking out of here alone, about the calls she would have to make, the explanations she would have to give. She thought about Derek boarding a plane while she stood here in her grandmother's lace, drowning in humiliation. Then she felt Vincent's presence beside her, solid and unwavering. This man who barely knew her was willing to bind himself to her rather than see her destroyed by his brother's cowardice. I am certain, Father. Natalie said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Sophie rushed forward from where she had been standing near the entrance. She grabbed Natalie's arm, pulling her slightly away from Vincent. Her whisper was urgent and frantic. Natalie, you cannot be serious. You do not even know him. This is crazy. Natalie met her best friend's eyes. Crazier than standing here alone while everyone watches me fall apart? Crazier than letting Derek define this day as the worst moment of my life? But marriage is not something you do out of spite or pride. Sophie insisted, her grip tightening. What happens tomorrow when you wake up married to a stranger? Vincent spoke before Natalie could respond, his voice measured and clear. Sophie, is it? I appreciate your concern for your friend. You are right to question this. But I am not asking Natalie to make an irreversible decision today. We can discuss the practical arrangements privately. What I am offering right now is the dignity of completing the ceremony she planned, rather than walking out of here as the woman Derek Morrison abandoned. He turned his attention back to Natalie, and when he spoke again, his voice held a note of vulnerability that surprised her. This can be whatever you need it to be. An arrangement that we dissolve quietly in a few months if that is your wish. But today, right now, let me stand beside you instead of him. Natalie's father suddenly appeared at her other side. His face was red with barely contained fury. His voice came out low and dangerous. Morrison, I do not know what game you are playing, but my daughter is not a prize to be claimed because your brother screwed up. Vincent met her father's glare without flinching. Mr. Chen, I assure you this is not a game. Your daughter deserves better than what Derek gave her. If you would prefer, she can walk out of here right now with no obligation to anyone. But if she chooses to go through with a ceremony, I am offering to stand beside her. The choice is entirely hers. Natalie placed a hand on her father's arm. Dad, please. Let me do this my way. Her father looked at her for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to heartbreak. Then he pulled her into a tight embrace, his voice rough against her ear. If he hurts you, if any of this goes wrong, you come home. You understand me? You always have a home. Tears stung Natalie's eyes, but she blinked them back. She nodded against her father's shoulder before pulling away. She turned to Vincent, studying his face properly for the first time. He had always seemed so distant at family gatherings, always on his phone or deep in conversation with Derek about business matters. She realized she knew almost nothing about him beyond his reputation as a brilliant but ruthless businessman. Why are you really doing this? Natalie asked quietly, searching his eyes for the truth beneath the practical explanations. Vincent held her gaze, and something in his expression shifted. The professional mask slipped just enough for her to glimpse what lay beneath. Because Derek has taken things for granted his entire life. Vincent said, his voice carrying an edge of long-held frustration. Our parents gave him everything. Every opportunity, every advantage, and he wasted most of them. When he told me he was marrying you, I thought perhaps he had finally found something worth valuing. Someone who might help him grow up. He paused, his jaw tightening. Then I attended your engagement party 6 months ago. I watched you coordinate everything while Derek socialized and took credit for your work. I watched you make sure his grandmother had a comfortable chair and his cousin with anxiety felt included in conversations. I watched you notice everyone except yourself. Natalie felt her cheeks warm under his intense scrutiny. She had no memory of Vincent paying particular attention that night. Vincent continued, his voice dropping lower. I found myself at 3 more family events after that, events I would normally have avoided. I told myself it was to support Derek. But I knew the truth. I was there to see you. To watch the way you moved through rooms making everyone feel welcome. To hear you laugh at bad jokes and ask thoughtful questions about people's lives. His admission hung in the air between them, honest and complicated and far more than Natalie had expected. When Derek called me this morning, Vincent said, anger creeping back into his tone, he actually had the audacity to ask me to clean up his mess. To come here and offer you money for your trouble. To make this go away quietly. Natalie felt fresh humiliation wash over her. Derek had reduced their entire relationship to a problem requiring financial compensation. Vincent's hand came up to gently touch her chin, tilting her face up to meet his eyes. So yes, I am here to prevent your humiliation. But I am also here because I have spent 6 months telling myself that what I felt was inappropriate. That you were my brother's fiancée and therefore completely off limits. And when he called this morning, my first thought was not about family loyalty or scandal management. It was that he had finally given me a chance to have what I had convinced myself I could never have. The confession stole Natalie's breath. She saw truth in his eyes, complicated and raw and undeniably real. Father Williams cleared his throat. If we are going to proceed, we should do so before the guests become even more restless. Vincent offered Natalie his arm. Last chance to change your mind. We can walk out of here together right now, and I will make sure you have everything you need to start over. No obligations, no strings attached. Natalie looked down the aisle at the faces of her family and friends. At her mother who was quietly crying. At her co-workers from the elementary school who had taken time off to be here. At the carefully arranged flowers and the champagne waiting at the reception hall. She thought about Derek somewhere in an airport lounge, probably congratulating himself on his narrow escape. She thought about Vincent, this intense man who had apparently been watching her for months, seeing things about her that Derek had never noticed. She slipped her hand through Vincent's arm. Let us give them a wedding to remember. They walked together to the altar. Father Williams opened his prayer book with trembling hands and began the ceremony. His voice wavered slightly at first but grew stronger as he progressed through the traditional words. When he asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute and charged with disbelief. Natalie half expected someone to stand up and declare this entire situation insane. But the moment passed. Vincent's responses were clear and unwavering. He produced a platinum band from his pocket, and Natalie wondered briefly if he had been carrying it or if he had somehow acquired it in the past hour. I, Vincent Alexander Morrison, take you, Natalie Grace Chin, to be my lawfully wedded wife. His voice carried through the chapel with absolute certainty. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. When it was Natalie's turn, she found her voice steady and clear. The words felt both surreal and strangely right. She watched Vincent's face as she spoke her vows, seeing the way his eyes never wavered from hers. Father Williams reached the final pronouncement. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride. Vincent stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame Natalie's face with surprising tenderness. He gave her a moment to pull away, a silent question in his eyes. When she did not move, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not the chaste, appropriate kiss she expected. Vincent kissed her with carefully controlled intensity, as if he had been holding himself back for months and this was his first taste of freedom. Natalie felt the kiss down to her toes, felt heat bloom through her chest, felt something shift fundamentally in the space between them. When they finally broke apart, the chapel erupted in uncertain applause. They turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, and Natalie saw shock, confusion, and more than a few expressions of scandalized fascination. Vincent's hand tightened on hers. Ready to face the chaos? Natalie looked up at her new husband and felt a smile tug at her lips despite everything. Too late to turn back now, the reception at the Harborview Hotel proceeded with the surreal quality of a play where the actors had been switched mid-performance. Guests moved through the elegant ballroom in clusters, their conversations hushed and speculative. The string quartet played on, their music providing a civilized soundtrack to the most unconventional wedding Seattle had seen in years. Natalie stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, watching ferries glide across the gray water. Her reflection in the glass showed a bride who looked remarkably composed considering her world had turned upside down 3 hours ago. Vincent moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and deflecting questions with the smooth expertise of someone accustomed to controlling narratives. Sophie appeared at Natalie's elbow, pressing a glass of champagne into her hand. You need to drink something. You have barely eaten or had anything since this morning. Natalie took a sip, the bubbles sharp against her tongue. She had not realized how thirsty she was until the cool liquid touched her lips. Are you going to tell me what you are thinking? Sophie asked, her voice gentle but probing. Because from where I am standing, you just married a man you have spoken to maybe a dozen times in 2 years. Natalie watched Vincent across the room. He was speaking with her parents now, his posture relaxed but attentive. Her mother was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and her father's expression had shifted from fury to something more complicated. Resignation mixed with grudging respect, perhaps. I am thinking that Derek spent 2 years with me and never once looked at me the way Vincent did today. Natalie said quietly. I am thinking that I felt more seen in the 10 minutes Vincent spoke to me at the altar than I did in 24 months with his brother. Sophie was silent for a moment, processing this. Then she sighed. Okay. But what happens now? Where do you even go from here? Before Natalie could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. The ballroom doors burst open, and Derek Morrison stumbled inside, his hair disheveled and his tie askew. His eyes were wild as they scanned the room, finally landing on Natalie. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every person in the ballroom turned to watch this new chapter of drama unfold. Natalie. Derek called out, his voice rough and desperate. He started across the floor toward her, weaving slightly. Had he been drinking? Vincent materialized between them before Derek could reach her. His movement was smooth and unhurried, but there was something dangerous in the way he positioned himself as a barrier. You need to leave. Vincent said, his voice low but carrying clearly in the silent room. Derek tried to look around his brother. Natalie, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I panicked, but I am back now. We can fix this. Natalie stepped forward so she could see Derek properly past Vincent's shoulder. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You left me standing at the altar, Derek. You got on a plane while I waited for you in my wedding dress. I know. Derek ran his hands through his hair, making it stand up in uneven spikes. I freaked out. The commitment, the permanence of it all, it just hit me and I could not breathe. But I realized on the flight that I was being an idiot. That I love you. That we belong together. Vincent's laugh was cold and sharp. You realized this after you landed in Portland? Or after someone told you she married me instead? Derek's face flushed. This is between me and Natalie. You had no right to swoop in like some kind of predator taking advantage of the situation. Taking advantage? Vincent's voice dropped to something dangerous. I gave her a choice. Something you never did when you abandoned her without explanation or apology. Natalie placed a hand on Vincent's arm, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. She stepped fully around him to face Derek directly. You do not get to do this. She said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. You do not get to run away and then come back expecting everything to be waiting for you like a paused video game. Derek's expression crumbled. But I love you. That has to count for something. Natalie felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were not tears of longing or regret. They were tears of release, of finally letting go of something she had been clutching too tightly. You loved the idea of me. She said softly. You loved having someone who organized your life and made you look good at family events. But you never really saw me, Derek. Not the way you should see someone you want to spend your life with. Derek looked past her to Vincent, and his expression twisted with something ugly. So what, you are going to stay married to him? To my brother? Do you even know what kind of man he is? He destroys companies for profit. He is cold and calculating and he will never love you the way I do. Vincent moved beside Natalie, his hand finding hers. Perhaps you are right. His voice was calm, conversational even. Perhaps I am cold and calculating. But I was here, Derek. When you ran, I stayed. When you chose cowardice, I chose to stand beside her. And I can promise you this, I will never leave her waiting at an altar wondering if she was ever enough. The words landed like hammer blows. Derek swayed slightly, his face pale. Security personnel appeared at his elbows, clearly summoned by someone in the wedding party. "You need to go." Natalie's father stepped forward, his voice brooking no argument. "You have caused enough damage for one day." Derek allowed himself to be escorted toward the exit, but at the doors he turned back one last time. "You will regret this, Natalie. Both of you will regret this." Then he was gone, and the ballroom erupted in a buzz of excited conversation. Natalie felt her legs go weak, and Vincent's arm immediately came around her waist, supporting her weight. "Do you need to sit down?" he asked quietly, his mouth close to her ear. She shook her head. "I need air. Can we go outside?" Vincent guided her through the crowd and out onto a covered terrace overlooking the water. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. The city lights were beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. Natalie leaned against the railing, breathing deeply. The cool air helped clear her head. She felt Vincent's presence behind her, close but not crowding. "You did not have to defend me like that," she said after a moment. "I could have handled Derek myself." "I know you could have," Vincent replied. "But you should not have to handle everything alone. That was part of Derek's problem. He let you carry all the weight." Natalie turned to face him. "What are we doing, Vincent? Really? Where do we go from here?" Vincent studied her face, his green eyes reflecting the soft light strung along the terrace. "We have options. I own a penthouse downtown with 3 bedrooms. You can have your own space, complete privacy. We can treat this as a legal arrangement and live essentially separate lives if that is what you need." "And if that is not what I need?" Natalie heard herself ask. Something shifted in Vincent's expression, heat flickering behind his usual control. "Then we explore the alternative. We take time to actually know each other. We see if what I feel has any basis in reality and if you might feel anything in return. No pressure, no expectations beyond basic respect and honesty." Natalie considered this. The rational part of her brain screamed that she should take the separate lives option. That she needed time to process Derek's betrayal before even thinking about another relationship. But another part of her, the part that had felt something electric when Vincent kissed her at the altar, was curious. What would it be like to be with someone who actually saw her? Who noticed the small things she did? Who valued her beyond what she could do for him? "I want to try," she said quietly. "I want to see what this could be." Vincent's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with heartbreaking gentleness. "Then we take it one day at a time. No rushing, no assumptions. Just 2 people learning each other." He leaned down and kissed her again, softer this time but no less affecting. Natalie felt herself melting into it, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "Your brother was wrong about one thing," she murmured. "You are not cold. Not even close." Vincent smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Maybe I was just waiting for someone worth warming up for." Sophie's voice called from the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but they are about to cut the cake." "Apparently, we are still doing that." Natalie laughed, the sound surprising her. It felt good to laugh after the emotional turmoil of the day. She took Vincent's offered hand, and together they walked back into the reception. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. They cut the cake, a 3-tier creation covered in cream roses that matched Natalie's bouquet. They danced their first dance to a song neither of them had chosen, but Vincent held her close and moved with surprising grace. Guests approached with congratulations that ranged from genuine to bewildered, but Natalie found she did not care what anyone thought. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Natalie found herself standing with Vincent near the hotel entrance. Rain had started again, a soft drizzle that painted halos around the streetlights. "Ready to see your new home?" Vincent asked, his hand warm in hers. Natalie looked down at the platinum band on her finger, then up at the man who had become her husband in the most unexpected way possible. She thought about Derek somewhere in the city, probably regretting his choices. She thought about the future she had planned that would never happen. But mostly, she thought about the green-eyed man beside her who had seen her when she felt invisible. Who had offered her dignity when she faced humiliation. Who kissed her like she was precious and spoke to her like she mattered. Yes. Natalie said, squeezing his hand. Take me home. Vincent's car pulled up, sleek and black and expensive. He opened the door for her, helping her gather the yards of silk and lace so they would not get caught. As they drove through the rainy Seattle streets, Natalie watched the city lights blur and shimmer through the water-streaked windows. She had walked into a chapel this morning as one person and emerged as someone entirely different. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring, what challenges this unconventional marriage would face. But for the first time in years, Natalie felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Vincent glanced over at her, and when their eyes met, he smiled. "Welcome to the adventure, Mrs. Morrison." Natalie smiled back, feeling hope bloom in her chest like spring flowers after a long winter. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The end.